Hi, I'm John Glass, a corporate real estate advisor at Savills, and I wanted to share some cost reduction strategies that I've been recommending to several of my tenant clients who may be concerned about their finances as they navigate through the COVID-19 health crisis. I want to preface by saying that this is uncharted territory for everybody. Uh, Landlords, tenants, property managers, so there's really no playbook, unfortunately, to adhere to when you're dealing with a global pandemic. And I say that because landlords are trying to navigate through this problem just like tenants are, and they have responsibilities and challenges like many companies, whether it be payroll, investors, loans on the building. So the manner and the tone in which you approach your landlord for rent relief or rent deferral really matters. And they're going to be more likely to work with those who are cooperative and forthcoming and adhere to whatever procedures that they recommend in order to evaluate um, and carry out your request. So that said, tip number one, and perhaps most obvious, is approach your landlord to request temporary rent relief in exchange for repayment at a later date. Now, most landlords have adopted a formal process for reviewing and evaluating rent deferral requests like this. So reach out to your point of contact, whether that be the landlord or the property manager, to see how they would suggest you proceed in formalizing a rent deferral request. Now, as part of the evaluation process, the landlord will likely request your current and past financials, a summary of the troubles that you are currently experiencing or anticipate experiencing, and what measures you have taken to mitigate damage to your business. They'll also want to know exactly what you're asking for in rent deferment, and that can be structured a couple of ways. Number one, it's periodic rent relief, say 2 to 3 months, in exchange for repayment in one lump sum at a later date. Number two, and perhaps most commonly requested by tenants, is rent relief in exchange for repayment over an extended period of time. So, for example, if your rent is $60,000 a month and you're requesting 2 months of rent deferment totaling $120,000, you may request that you pay back that amount starting, let's say, 1/1/21 over a 12-month period. So in addition to whatever your rent is at that time, you would pay an amortized amount of $10,000 a month over 12 months until you make that landlord whole on the $120,000 initial deferment. And number three, rent deferment in exchange for added lease term. This depends on where you are in your lease term. If the lease expiration is approaching, this may be an opportunity to restructure your lease, add some term in exchange for near-term concessions. Now, the number two tip, as a tenant, it's likely that you were required to pay a security deposit as part of signing the initial lease. And the landlord may be willing to credit that security deposit towards rent payments in exchange for reposting the security deposit as a later date. I would still recommend going with tip number one in terms of a formal rent deferment, but if you are unable to come to terms with your landlord in that regard, maybe they'll be willing to get creative and incorporate your security deposit as a terms of providing near-term cash if you post that as a later date. Number three, and this is probably the lowest hanging fruit, is cancel your monthly parking permits and until the office operations resume. In almost all cases, you'll be able to reactivate those spaces when the office opens up. So if you're a company that pays for its entire parking for its staff, then this certainly can add up. Number four, request modification of your operating expense bill that you are likely paying on a monthly basis in addition to your base rent. Now, many of these costs are going to be significantly less than what was initially budgeted at the beginning of the year. Obviously, the buildings are requiring less services as they remain nearly empty. So utilities, cleaning, management, these are all going to go down, and the landlord may be willing, or the property manager may be willing to adjust their monthly invoices in the near term, because at the end of the day, you're going to make them whole once they're reconciled at a later date. So it may be easier if you're on a triple net lease or a net of utilities lease, but this is a strategy that you may want to approach and exercise a property manager may be willing to do. And fifth strategy is look, it's the old barter system. You may want to make an offer to the landlord to trade market rate services for rent relief on a dollar for dollar basis. So for example, if you're a law firm, offer to provide legal services on a dollar for dollar basis of what your rent would be. Or if you're a nonprofit and let's say you have a marquee annual event, I know a lot of my clients have a big gala once a year that and they look to corporate sponsorships to pay for tables. And maybe you offer them a premium sponsorship at your next gala or marquee event in exchange for immediate rent relief. You know, these are, I purposely didn't address anything regarding the Federal CARES Act because that can change from company to company. But these are other strategies outside of that that, look, it's time to get creative. And again, it's a case by case basis. But if you have any other questions or ideas, please email me directly and happy to elaborate further. Thank you.